And so I understand that brands are challenged when it comes to Web3 concepts and metaverse platforms and gaming. But guess what? That's your job. And I say this very seriously because they need to really pay more attention to this. For brands, the greatest challenge is that they are likely to be disrupted by UGC creators. These individual creators who understand the platforms extremely well and knows what makes people tick on those platforms. So you don't need to follow the rules. There are no more rules. Hi, I'm Catherine D. Henry, Managing Principal for Web3 and Metaverse, and I'm also author of Virtual Natives, How Gen Alpha is Revolutionizing the Future of Everything with Technology.
Catherine, thank you so much for joining us on the Forward podcast. It is great to have you.
Aziz, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. To help our listeners get to know you that little bit better, we ask all of our guests this at the very beginning of each episode. What drives you forward, both in your life and in your career?
I would say endless curiosity. I am an avid reader. And so for me, consuming lots of information and trying to interpret that information for the general public is my obsession. And so I have created a series of intelligence reports that distill important trends in technology and how those trends impact not only consumers, but also how important they are within the broader context of media and the marketplace.
Mm, that's a great answer. A lot of people, I love that curiosity as well in terms of being the catalyst for moving you forward, because you can definitely see that when you look back at your 20 years of this career, because you've garnered a whole lot of recognition for this unique ability to stay one step ahead of emerging trends and technologies. And when I looked back at your work and your history in this space, you tend to spot trends years ahead of time. Before you're like a psychic wizard of the tech industry. But before we go into those trends, would you tell us how you got your start in this space? And were there any big moments or world changes that brought you to where you are today?
It's funny because actually my career, I had to take a big risk to be in virtual and augmented reality. I spent some 15, 20 years in investment banking. So again, aging myself, but I was a tech advisor to major institutional investors. And so I would go around the world, mainly in Europe and Asia, and explain why some of these big trends were taking place and why they were important spaces for investment. And then around 2015, 2016, I tried the first VR experience at the Fifth Avenue Microsoft store on a brief visit home. And I thought, that's it. This is the future. And at the time, nobody was using VR. This was an installation. It's very expensive equipment. Nobody had it. At the time, people were just using cardboard for their heads. But I did a bit of research, and I thought, no, this is the space I want to be in. And so by 2016, I was all in. Enrolled in one of the first VR filmmaking courses at the New York Film Academy, and my friends and family were like, "What is this? And what are you doing? And why?" And it was a pivotal moment in my career. The challenge was that at the time, the technology was still undervalued, and we were talking about immersive experiences and interactive experiences when gaming was still relatively nascent, at least in the public imagination. Some of the platforms were starting to emerge. Immersive environments, i.e., projection mapping, was very popular, as were branded worlds, branded spaces. And to me, this is all part of a larger convergence of technology and lived experience. And then the pandemic happened and it catapulted all of these things in such a way that they converged. And so now we're in this great period of convergence and acceleration that represent long term structural shifts in the way we use technology and the way we live technology, because the advancements in both AI and virtual and augmented reality in the past few years are now such that they are within the public domain. And thanks to Meta mainly, and more recently Apple, people are starting to use these in their everyday lives. And so it's super exciting, but it was a big risk. And I'm really grateful because having studied marketing in graduate school, I've got an MBA, and also I studied, I have a master's in economics from Johns Hopkins. And that's all about trend forecasting, right? So you really have to listen carefully to what's being said across multiple sources, whether it's my friends who are in academia, my friends who are some of the big names in virtual and augmented reality, listening to all of the announcements that are being made by the tech leaders like Jensen Huang or Mark Zuckerberg or whomever. But then you also have to listen to Reddit. And I'm a keen observer of TikTok. I will be on there for hours, not just for entertainment. I want to hear what people are saying. And once you put that all together, you start to hear the signals from the noise. And so it's really about being exposed to multiple sources and doing lots of homework. But this is not only my passion, it's an obsession, and that's what culminated in my book, Virtual Natives.
And I'm so excited to talk about that book in a little while. But you mentioned a few things as well there that are very relevant to this discussion today, that I think making headway through noise, the convergence of all of these different technologies as well, the pandemic accelerating everything in a whole way that we could have never expected. And I know during a keynote speech that you gave in Mumbai last year, I think it was, you spoke about the rapid changes that are happening in the tech landscape. And when you go back to 2016 and you were speaking about, that cardboard for the virtual reality, we look at, 2019, the crypto craze, 2020, online gaming, Fortnite, Roblox, 2021, it was trying to understand what the metaverse would be, 2022, NFTs, Web3, 2023, AI, in terms of the public announcement of these technologies. So when you speak about convergence, is 2024 and onwards that convergence of all of these things? And what do businesses need to do to help prioritize to stay afloat with these immersive experiences?
First of all, I want to compliment you. Thank you very much for the great summary of my presentation. You clearly did your homework. So yeah, I call it the great convergence of the technologies, and the acceleration is indeed intense, to say the least, especially over the past year with AI. However, I do feel that people are allowing themselves to be carried away. So people are allowing themselves to get carried away by AI. And they shouldn't lose sight of the bigger picture. Again, what is a long term structural shift that's happening? It's virtualization. And virtualization means the shift between the digital hands first platforms into virtual media, which enables us to interact with multiple screens in a given space, or objects, virtual objects in our space, and interact more naturally because these are 3D environments. So AI is accelerating our ability to create and to use these tools. However, hardware is moving equally fast. And so this is still going to be a big year for spatial computing. I'm really looking forward to hearing the announcement of Tim Cook in a couple of days, where he's going to give us an update on what's happening with the Apple Vision Pro. But equally exciting things are happening at Samsung. The micro LED and basically invisible screen is the future of Minority Report type of experiences. We're also expecting more announcements from Samsung potentially for a headset this year. Um, Palmer Luckey, who was the person who created the Oculus, which then became the Meta Quest headset, has also said that he's working on a headset. I have recently been invited to a conference in Asia, and my book will coincidentally be published in China. And I'd really like to see what's happening on the ground there, because the usage of technology, as cited in my article in TechCrunch on China in the Metaverse in 2021, um, it illustrates how rapidly things are happening around the world that may not come to the surface until later. So it's important to watch all these micro evolutions and think about how they come together. And I do believe that hardware and spatial computing are going to play a big role over the next year.
Yeah, I've seen you talk about this a lot on LinkedIn, and the glasses that would be your laptop, basically, which is
Yeah.
so interesting. When you come over to Asia, you'll have to visit us in Vietnam as well, please. It'll be great to have you.
Oh, yeah, fantastic. I've
Yeah,
been there before, but I'd be happy to visit you.
do it again, please. When I think of this transition, as you mentioned, especially in retail, how I get my head around it is it feels like we're entering our Sims era. I mentioned that in our notes. Trend papers will say, we're seeing a rise in and demand in digital only products. The distance between virtual and physical experiences are minimizing. And as you mentioned, those trapdoors have opened with so many of these big brands kicking off this domino effect of new hardware coming out to the market. When we look at how consumer trust can be anchored within the opportunity to experience immersive technology and hardware, what happens to the smaller brands that may not have the budget for all of this? What are the challenges that will come to them as we hurtle towards peak season and all of these mad times where retail has a microscope over it?
Mm. Well, first of all, I love the idea of the Sims era. I think that's fantastic, and the domino effect. Here, I would say, however, the massive difference between these worlds, these online worlds, and the physical world, especially if we're thinking about the internet era 2.0, which is effectively the social media era, the era of, big Facebook, big Instagram, pre TikTok. And some of the issues that evolved at the time was the abuse of the power of those specific platforms to both manipulate and dominate conversations. And so, what we're seeing now, however, in the virtual space is that many of the predominant platforms like Roblox and increasingly now Fortnite, and as well as the VR spaces like VR chat, what's exciting about those are dominated by UGC content. What is that? That's user generated content, which means that me or you or you're more likely your little brother or my my cousin would be able to go on there and create worlds and create content and create outfits and sell them. And the challenge for brands is that they can't control these brands. They can't control these environments. Why is it that Adopt Me is so popular? Listen, I've been on Roblox a million times. I can't explain it. What I can tell you though is that people who use that platform a lot in Roblox understand perfectly well why, Adopt Me is so popular, at Bloxburg and others. And so, what I try to do is break down those fundamental elements, but I don't think people are spending enough time there. For me, as a digital anthropologist, it's really important to understand what drives people in these spaces. And so for brands, the greatest challenge is that they are likely to be disrupted by UGC creators. These individual creators who understand the platforms extremely well and knows what makes people tick on those platforms. And so the Roblox economy, Fortnite economy, those are burgeoning. And if you know what's important to the people on those platforms, how they like to flex, what they enjoy doing, as you said, the physical and the digital are increasingly converging. So, what is it that makes your brand fan online tick, and how can you deliver it there? And I don't think a lot of people understand what that is. So, what's the solution? I think the solution is to spend more time online, nurture your brand community online, listen to your brand mods or people that are creating your brand in these spaces. Because trust me, if it exists, rule number one of the internet, there's something out there. If it exists in the physical world, it exists online, right? So if you're if you're, let's just say, the Subway sandwich maker or 7-Eleven, I've seen so many versions of those different spaces online. You have to embrace it because that's part of the lore and the excitement around your brand, and have let people do create something around it. So how do you also co-opt and nurture that fandom? I don't know. I think this is definitely up to brands to step in because those will be your biggest competitors in the future.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we all look, brands will look across to each other for competition, but you would never expect it to be your own consumer customers and day to day average standard humans that could be your competitors. And before we hit record, we are talking briefly about the different terminologies and how it may be difficult for, I had originally said customers, but you made a really good point that I'd like to bring to this in terms of, I had said it will probably be difficult for customers with this, new terminologies that are coming to the surface with this digital world. And you said, no, actually, it's the brands that need to keep up. So, can we talk about that in terms of how brands can become more tech literate? I don't know if that's the right word to use, but as they try to keep up with their customers.
Yeah. Listen, I understand the struggle because I, as a managing principal at a major engineering firm, global engineering firm, it's difficult to stay on top of trends and also get the daily work done. And so I understand that brands are challenged when it comes to Web3 concepts and metaverse platforms and gaming. But guess what? That's your job. And I say this very seriously because they need to really pay more attention to this. Recently, I was looking at a statistic that said that obviously Gen X boomers are at the top of the pyramid when in most of companies. And so the platforms that they know that they consider new media are the ones that are getting the most media spend. So they're still spending way too much money on platforms like Google when TikTok has usurped it. They're still spending too much time on like Instagram and Facebook ads. Why? And so you need to really make that shift in terms of how you want to reach your future customers. Gen Z represents 50% of the global workforce, and also they will be at their peak earning years, the beginning of that arc of their peak earning years by 2030. That's 4 years away, 4.5 years away. So look, we really need to think about how we're going to prepare for this new generation. Because again, if we start today, we're not really going to be ready to implement till next year. That gives us 5 years to get going. But we need to tap into the things that excite them most today and where they are. So gaming is a fundamental part of where our customers are. The other thing is that when it comes to reciprocity, brands need to understand that they need to let go a lot more of their IP, of their messaging, of their content creation. What does reciprocity look like for your brand? Of course, you're thinking, we spent so much time crafting this very perfect message. Well, maybe it doesn't need to be perfect. Maybe that's kind of the joy of reciprocity is saying, I know you enjoy this. Instead of watching me make it, why don't you make it? Why don't you create something new with it? And so that's part of enabling people to play and enjoy your brand. So we need to evolve with the culture. And there are certain expectations that, again, we outlined in our book that are part of the user experience and the user journey that aren't being recognized by brands today. So, my advice again to brands is spend more time on the platforms, understand that the nature of brands is evolving, the nature of fandom is evolving, and it's evolving in new marketplaces where you need to spend more time and, frankly, more money.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great answer. Can we talk about virtual natives now and
Sure.
why all of this is so important for future business leaders, entrepreneurs, retailers, startups, the entire world? Why is it so important for us to become familiar with virtual natives and how can we best serve them? And you kind of answered a little bit of it, but let's go into it further.
Yeah, thanks. So, Virtual Natives is the name of my book, and it talks about how Gen Alpha is revolutionizing the future. And when I say revolutionizing, I mean that sincerely because what we're talking about is this new generation has been given a set of tools that are completely natural to them. But instead of being digital passive tools that have been pre baked in, these are interactive tools. And so as a result, they're the ones who know it best, and they're the ones who are using this to shortcut a lot of processes. So rather than to go through a really long process to complete a task, they're going to hack it. And so, whether it's by creating video or sharing information online, they're able to create shortcuts that have very significant implications for the future of business. Because again, older generations are used to following procedures, but this generation doesn't follow the rules. what they do is they leapfrog. So what I do is digital anthropology. What are these people doing across multiple platforms? And nobody has looked at this for 20 years. I know this because it took us 3 years of research, and building that bridge was a lot of work. So in the dawn of the internet in 1998, when the term digital natives was first conceived, this was before 4 or 5 years before Mark Zuckerberg even started college. So this is well before the social media age 1.0. And so now we're in a completely different computing era. And so that has different implications for the future of business. And I would say that it also, more broadly, is disrupting the way the future of education. If I look at my nephew who's 10,
Mm.
well, I'll say, how did you learn that? He told us a story that was really profound about the true meaning of finding Nemo. And my brother and I looked at him, how does he know that? He's, yeah, YouTube. We were just
Oh my
astonished.
gosh.
But we know that it's a really powerful learning platform because, again, when I was studying VR filmmaking, I would look at my classmates and I'd say, "Wow, where'd you learn that trick?" And they're like, "Oh, YouTube." I'm like, so we really have to think about the nature of this community building that supports
Mm.
each other in a way that we never had before. At least my generation didn't have, and so we need to pay attention to the strength of community, the strength of the tools that are disposable to them, the fact that they will learn new tools from different ways. So, again, requirements that people have a certain formation will no longer be valid. It's like, what can they do? What have
Mm.
they taught themselves? And even in my own experience, I started a broadcast and started publishing my intelligence reports, which did everything from like 75-page interactive documents of all of the wearables um, or in the industry at the time that were interactive. You could click and have all the videos in there. I also did
Oh.
a number of reports that rivaled some of the McKinsey reports. I honestly think they're better because I mean I spent many years as an analyst. I know what I'm doing.
Pop off, Catherine.
I
Yes.
don't mean to boast, but I spent like 3 months creating these things on my own, but they're
Folks.
fresh research and they're very deep,
Mm.
they're very relevant to the industry. And so I created all of these documents, and then suddenly I was able to garner the attention of the broader XR community, and people could see that I was very passionate and knowledgeable about my field. And so that just shows you how the power of technology can
Mm.
bring talent to the forefront. And I say this as a great opportunity for people to nurture their talents and to showcase their talents. And we're seeing that already in social media platforms. And that's going to be absolutely the same, if not more so, in 3D environments. And so this is going to be tremendously disruptive on the one hand, but also in terms of identifying new talent, of building new opportunities for revenue opportunities. This is really powerful. And I want to cite a recent example, which is Adidas just announced that they have a gaming division. I love that because every company is going to need to have their own gaming division because this is the new media platform. These are the assets that people value the most. And when I say people, we're talking about people under the age of 25. And so this is an emerging space that's not going away. And I'm super
Yeah.
excited about it. And I'm excited for the potential of people who may not have access to very expensive education or want to learn new tools. All of that's available to them. And it's going to
Mm.
be very disruptive to traditional structures. How do we embrace that? It's going to be interesting
Mm.
to see.
That's really, really interesting, and there's so much in that to grasp and take in, because even you can see that cross learning experience coming too with the virtual natives or that younger generation, helping to educate an older generation and vice versa. Whereas we've never really seen that before. It's normally been the other way around.
Exactly.
And that collaboration in order to move forward together is really nice to imagine. And having those spaces to get creative and gaming rooms, it just seems like a whole new world that we're hurtling towards. And it's not hype in that sense because it's happening now. Like, you have
It's
to just
happening
grasp
now if
it.
you choose to see it, yeah. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, again, the hierarchical structures, we talk in the book about the requirements of people saying, "You've gotta get back to work, and this is the way, you've gotta be
Mm,
in the office." Office culture is important, but office culture is what? Pizza on a Friday? I mean, we need to be very honest about what the reciprocity looks like, again, not just for creators, but also your future employees. They're
mm,
not going to wait their turn for some magical, to achieve some magical hierarchical ladder. It's not going to happen. They're not they're disillusioned by, I
yeah.
think, um, what their parents, the millennials, have experienced, the
Mm,
disruption, the economic disruption that they've experienced. And so they feel as though, they've inherited this side hustle culture, which
yes.
suggests to them that actually, if you create your own platform, if you create your own tools or your own assets, you can be successful. So you don't need to follow the rules. There
Yeah.
are no more rules. And so this is a wildly new era, as you pointed out, and it's super
Wow.
exciting.
Yeah. Where could people get your book?
The book is available on Amazon. It's available on basically all online retailers, Walmart, Target, Finoc, and soon it's going to
Everywhere.
be published in Chinese as well. So I'm super excited about that.
Great.
Yeah, and it's in major bookstores as well. So go into Barnes and Nobles anywhere, you should be able to find it. But virtual natives, how the new generation is revolutionizing the future of everything.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Now, every episode, we also have a feature called Move Forward and Leave Behind. In the nature of the Forward podcast, we try to look at things that we should grab hold of and move forward with, and things that we need to shed and leave behind in the past. So, I'm going to ask you this in the context of Web3. It's very broad, but what are three things that should move forward, and three fads that should be left behind?
Yeah. Thinking in terms of Gen Alpha, I would say there are three main themes. The first would be community. And so we need to embrace community and less individualism. Community is everything. And without community, we as a species don't survive. So we need to think more in terms of how inclusive we can be, because this is the most diverse generation ever. And they identify as such across every possible way that you could identify them, by gender, by race, by ethnicity, all of those things. And so inclusivity and community are important, and just get rid of the idea of the individual hero. The second thing I would say is that for brands, we need to think about reciprocity. So again, community is one thing, but again, if you're part of a community, what do you bring to the table? So it's not a one-sided conversation. What are you giving back to your fans and the people that admire you most? And by the way, I would extend that not just to brands, but to companies generally. What are you giving back? We talked earlier about culture being pizza. Now, it's got to be more than that. So we need to think about reciprocity. So community, reciprocity, leaving behind the idea that this is a hierarchical organization with some paternalistic figure like Steve Jobs. It's a completely different ballgame. So if we're thinking about this new generation, it's community, reciprocity, and I would say the third thing, inclusivity. I know there's a lot of conversation about, oh, DEI, et cetera. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about inclusivity in the sense that every everyone has some sort of potential, and especially for Gen Alpha, they're looking how they can develop that online. So they're going to have something specific to contribute. And so we need to think about how can we take this diverse talent pool and incorporate that into what we're doing, whether it's from a fan perspective, future employee, or it's they've got a service offering. How do we identify this new pipeline of talent that can plug into what we're already doing? And whether it's by, again, reciprocity, can we give awards? Can we nominate? Can we ask people to somehow help us evolve our brand, or hackathon? All of these things enable this new talent to come forward. And so these could be some of your future collaborators instead of your future competitors. So inclusivity, I think, is a really important way to go. And it just ties into the broader age of Aquarius into which I think we're evolving.
Wow, that's brilliant. I really love that last part as well, that inclusivity and the other side of it, because you can see it. There is that fragmented view of future careers. And it started with, I think, millennials as well, in terms of this workplace isn't built for me. The hierarchical set that you spoke of, that career journey, having 20 years in one career, that doesn't fit me as a person. And you can see that inclusivity is so important now for that younger generation coming up and feeling that if you don't have your full life career journey figured out now, that's okay. You don't need to. You could have multiple careers in
Yeah.
one lifetime and you can make it what you want.
Well, what I'd say also is look, companies not have not been very faithful or loyal to workers either, and young people know this. So they're doing their job, but they also understand that they could be let go tomorrow. So if employment is at will, then guess what? They're taking control of their own careers. And we covered this extensively in the book. But I think it's important to note that gig workers are precarious workers. And so what they're saying is, I want financial independence. I'm going to define my career on my own terms. And I'm going to build up not only a skill set, but a business that no one can take away from me. So, how can we work alongside this new generation of entrepreneurs and help, both help evolve our own offering and at the same time acknowledge the talent that they bring to the table?
Yeah, lovely. And a last question I'd love to ask you.
Yeah.
We normally ask people, what advice would you give to your younger self? But again, in the theme of looking forward to the future, what advice would you give to your future self?
um, I have really high standards. I think there's, I would like to always say, work harder, but do more. I kind of exhort myself to do that every day, and
Mm.
that will never change. So I don't know.
That curiosity. It's that curiosity. You want to know everything everywhere all at once.
Get that book out sooner. I'm working on a second book because I have a third one in mind, and I don't have a lot of time.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah, I know, because I have a day job. So I'm trying to figure out how to do all that. I don't really know. All I say is that, you know, I'm always excited about the future. I always keep my ear to the ground. I'm always asking kids like what their favorite hobbies are, what they play, what they're on, da da da, what they've bought, and I just try to stay young at heart and open to the bigger conversation that's happening across platforms. That's not gonna change. So, listen, I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm super excited about this space, and, I just hope that continues. That's all.
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Catherine. And thank you for joining us on the Forward podcast. It was wonderful to have you.
The pleasure has been mine, Aziza. Thank you so much again.